Welcome back to Conflicts of Interest. This is episode 813, and today is June 23rd, 2025. I'm the host of the show, Kyle Anzalone. And of course, on today's show, we are breaking down the U.S. attack on Iran, Trump going to war with the Iranians. We'll break down the lead up to the attack, what we know about the attack, how successful was the attack, and of course, the fallout from the strikes on 3 Iranian facilities. So you will want to share and promote this episode. It will definitely help out the show. We are on YouTube, Rumble, Odysee. I post all the shows on X as well. And of course, you can subscribe to audio podcasts everywhere, including at the Libertarian Institute and on the Libertarian Institute All podcast feed. All right, with that, let's jump into the news today. We have a lot of it. So I do want to give a quick update on Gaza before we get into all the Iran stuff. Israeli forces slaughtered 48 more Palestinians in Gaza over 24 hours. So Dave reports Gaza's health ministry said on Sunday that Israeli forces had killed at least 48 Palestinians and wounded over 104 others over the previous 24-hour period, as the U.S.-backed genocidal war continues with much of the world's attention on the U.S. attacks on Iran. The health ministry said that the bodies of another 3 Palestinians killed by previous Israeli attacks were also recovered. The Israeli forces have continued their daily massacres of desperate aid-seeking Palestinians. Medical sources told Al Jazeera at least 6 of those killed were Palestinians that were attempting to seek aid. Since the U.S. and Israel-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, or the GHF, began operations at the end of May, so about 3 weeks ago, over 400 Palestinians have been killed by the IDF while seeking aid. Imagine, you set up aid distribution sites and you murder 400 plus people attempting to get that aid. Anywhere else in the world, this would be a massive outrage. Anywhere else in the world, the United States and our elected leaders are discussing going and conducting a war against the Israeli government to prevent a humanitarian crisis like this. And in this case, we are helping Israel carry it out. Israeli airstrikes and shelling also pounded targets across Gaza on Sunday. According to the Palestinian news agency Wafa, at least 5 Palestinians, including 2 children, were killed by Israeli attacks on a home in the Zawada, central Gaza. Other Israeli attacks in central Gaza killed several Palestinians in the Nusra refugee camp. In southern Gaza, Israeli strikes hit tents sheltering displaced Palestinians in the Al-Mawasi area of Khan Yunis. This is where Israel is hurting all the Palestinians, and they're just bombing those tents and they're killing people. So this is just absolutely horrific what's going on in Gaza. Part of the reason that I haven't done as much coverage of it isn't just that I've been covering and spending so much time covering the situation going on in Iran, and particularly that now involves American intervention. But Israel has killed so many journalists. There's often blackouts and power outages. It's very hard to get good reporting, good content, verifiable information out of Gaza at this point. And that's by Israel's design, right? They don't want anybody to be able to talk about their genocide, the ethnic cleansing that they're carrying out. All right. On to the situation in Gaza. I have a few articles here on the lead up to the attack. So this one I published on Friday at antiwar.com. Again, this is before the attack happened. CIA chief echoes Mossad finding on Iran nuclear program. It appears the Donald Trump administration is favoring an assessment from Israeli intelligence that Iran could obtain a nuclear weapon in as little as 15 days. Portions of the intelligence community say Tehran has not decided to build a nuclear weapon and would be at least a year away from building a functioning weapon. U.S. intelligence also assesses a U.S. attack on Iran would provoke Tehran to develop a strategic weapon. So according to the New York Times on Thursday, some American officials said those new assessments echoed material provided by Mossad, which believes Iran can achieve a nuclear weapon within 15 days. While some American officials find the Israeli estimate credible, others emphasize U.S. intelligence assessment remained unchanged, and American spy agencies believe that it could take several months and up to a year for Iran to make a weapon, the report explained. And so this is what I think is going on. Mossad produced this intelligence, and basically what that report actually concluded is if Iran started trying to enrich and had a facility and everything was set up perfectly, if their goal was to take their 60% enriched uranium and get it to weapons grade, which I believe is 95% plus, it could take 15 days to spin that material to get enough weapons grade uranium to build a small nuclear bomb. That's what they're saying. So if Iran wants to build the smallest nuclear bomb possible, and again, this would just give them the fissile material, they could do that within 15 days. Of course, building a nuclear bomb is far more complicated than just having the enriched uranium, right? Like, and particularly for Iran, it would be one thing, the United States, Russia, China, who obviously have a process and are capable of easily building a nuclear weapon, where in Iran's case, they would probably need to test the nuclear weapon. They would need to build a delivery system for that nuclear weapon. They would need to build all other kinds of fuses and parts to make that nuclear weapon and that enriched uranium actually into a strategic bomb. And so the idea that Iran could have a bomb within 15 days is simply ludicrous. And it appears that this intelligence came from Mossad at the behest of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, because he believed he needed it to push Trump to go to war with Iran. So this whole intelligence assessment did what it was intended to do by the Israelis: manipulate our president into declaring and going into an unnecessary war. So in March, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard told Congress that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon. Officials speaking with CNN earlier this week said it could take 3 years for Tehran to build a strategic weapon and a delivery system. Again, even if you have a bomb, that's not exactly what you need in this situation. You need a missile to put that bomb onto that could accurately deliver it to the target you want to go to. I mean, there may be some other ways, like an underwater drone that you could put the bomb on or something to deliver it to Israel, but you would still need some kind of delivery system that Iran doesn't have. None of their missiles are capable of carrying a nuclear bomb. They're not designed to do so. Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapons program, and a nuclear weapons program includes more than just a nuclear weapon. It means missiles or submarines or aircraft, all of which Iran lacks, capable of firing the nuclear weapon at the target that they want to hit. And so, you know, the whole thing is just a complete and utter farce. However, the Trump administration sources say Gabbard has been sidelined on the Iran issue. This is from NBC News. National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard, an outspoken critic of past U.S. military interventions abroad, appears to have fallen out of favor with President Donald Trump as he weighs military action against Iran. Multiple senior administration officials say Gabbard has been sidelined in internal administration discussions about the conflict between Israel and Iran. And so again, this is a case, it seems like, where Trump is basically hearing information he doesn't want to hear. He got an assessment that he likes more from the Israelis, and he's just going with it. He's ignoring his own director of national intelligence, who, you know, that March report wasn't a one-off. That was the assessment going back to 2007 by the U.S. intelligence community. So nearly 2 decades of U.S. directors of national intelligence. And so that includes Trump's first administration, the end of the Bush administration, the Obama administration, the Biden administration. All of these intelligence officials and intelligence community had continued to assess that not only was Iran not building a nuclear weapon, but they haven't even decided that they wanted to, that they still had a policy in place that explicitly banned the production of a nuclear weapon or weapons of mass destruction in general. And so this is, again, just a farce and absurdity. So, you know, it seems that CIA Director Radcliffe appears to be one of the advocates of the Mossad position within the White House. Breaking Point's host Sagar Enjeti reports a senior U.S. intelligence official tells me that there is zero independent U.S. intelligence to back up CIA Director Radcliffe's pronouncement that Iran is at the what he called 1 yard line of a nuclear weapon, and all the intelligence is coming from Israel. So the Times spoke with sources who said the Israeli assessment could be fabricated to meet some of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's need to drive the U.S. into the war. Tel Aviv needs Washington to bomb some of Iran's most fortified nuclear targets, and we'll certainly be getting into that in a minute. So this does seem, and Tulsi being sidelined, does seem to have moved her. I wrote this one again on Friday for antiwar.com. Gabbard falls in line, claims Iran is close to nukes. So Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard accused the media of misrepresenting her statement in March that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon. The shift followed attacks on America's top intelligence official by President Donald Trump. So on Friday, Gabbard posted a clip of her March Senate testimony claiming the dishonest media is intentionally taking my testimony out of context and spreading fake news as a way to manufacture division. And so again, her March statement, which is incredibly important, and many people have been saying that this look at this right here. We have our Director of National Intelligence saying that not only is Iran not at the 1 yard line, they haven't even started the game. They're not even building a nuclear weapon. So all these assessments about 15 days, 1 yard line, all that are obviously completely and utterly false. And yet, this is what Donald Trump believes. And so it had been thrown in Donald Trump's face a few times that, hey, your Director of National Intelligence obviously doesn't believe this. And Trump has criticized her, saying she's wrong and just being very dismissive about her. And rather than sticking up for this, rather than going to the press and saying, I resign, our president has been captured by Tel Aviv. He is believing Mossad intelligence that is manufactured to get us into a war, as reported by the New York Times, and over his own intelligence community, over the long-standing established position of the U.S. intelligence community. Trump is taking the word of Mossad and Benjamin Netanyahu so he could drag us into this war. Instead of that, Tulsi just completely tapped out and just agreed with what Trump had to say. Now, let's get into this next article. This one kind of details why the Israelis went to war when they did. I wrote this one for the Institute on June 22nd. Israel attacked Iran to prevent Trump from making a deal with Tehran. So one of the top reasons that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu launched a surprise attack on Iran was to prevent President Donald Trump from reaching a new nuclear agreement with Tehran, according to the Jerusalem Post. The Post spoke to a wide range of top political and defense decision makers about Tel Aviv's move to launch an offensive war against Iran. The sources said that one of the reasons Israel chose to attack Iran when it did was due to concerns that Trump could reach a nuclear pact with Iran and that made too many concessions from the perspective of Netanyahu. So this is the quote from the Jerusalem Post. Trump continued to flirt with Iranian diplomacy, letting two of his own deadlines pass, proceeding on a path that only seemed to make sense if he was going to eventually be willing to make concessions that Israel did not want him to make. And so Donald Trump, a man who presents himself as the world's greatest deal maker, all he's going to do is get elected president and make deals that benefit the American people, was in the process of doing that. And then America's proclaimed greatest ally, the state of Israel, went to war with Iran to prevent Trump from making that deal because they didn't like the deal that he was going to make. And obviously Donald Trump isn't bombing Israel over this, he's bombing Iran. So now, even with them being unwilling to make concessions, Tel Aviv did manage to interfere in the nuclear negotiations that were going on. This is again from the Jerusalem Post. Mossad Director David Barnea and IDF Intelligence Chief Major General Shlomi Binder, along with Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer and others, did all they could to convince Trump's team to harden their negotiating positions with some success. But when they saw that Iran was digging in its heels to maintain low-level enriched uranium and refusing to destroy its advanced centrifuges fleet, conceding that it would only put them on ice, these intelligence and diplomatic officials feared the worst could come if a new and bad nuclear deal would be agreed to at any moment. And so what they're saying here is that it wasn't Iran that was on the 1 yard line of building a nuclear weapon. It seems that they were on the 1 yard line of agreeing to a new nuclear deal with the US. And listen to the Israeli complaints here. Iran was going to be able to continue to enrich uranium to a low level, that 3.67% level. And you do wonder if, when they're talking about having some success in hardening the American positions, that actually refers back to when Steve Witkoff said, we could let Iran reach to 3.67%, and then the Trump administration changed their position. I bet that was Israeli influence that made that happen. Now, a second point here is that Iran was apparently willing to disconnect and put all their advanced centrifuges into storage. These are the centrifuges that would probably allow Iran to very quickly enrich uranium up to a higher level. And if they're willing to put all those in storage and then have a verified and inspected nuclear safeguards inspection regime to, make sure that they're not hooking up these centrifuges or anything like that, then you are significantly delaying the amount of time it would take Iran to build a nuclear weapon. Seemingly, this would be a great agreement if Trump would be willing to reach it, if your concern is that Iran is going to build a nuclear weapon. But that was not Israelis' concern. Again, in this article here, it actually notes that one of the primary motivations for the June 13th attack was not concerns over Iran's nuclear program. They were concerned that the U.S. was going to make a deal with Iran, which then would have taken the Israeli and American war against Iran off the table. That's what they didn't want to see happen. So a few other factors that led to Tel Aviv to attack Iran were the weakness of Tehran's allies in the region, Washington normalizing ties with Damascus, and Iran's 2 missile attacks on Israel in 2024, which, of course, those strikes were retaliation for Israeli bombing of the Iranian embassy in Damascus and the assassination of Hamas's political leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. And again, it's notable that the nuclear issue wasn't one of them. But listen to how, this is the Jerusalem Post, a very Tel Aviv-friendly outlet, how they described how the Iran's nuclear program weighed on Israel's decision to bomb Iran. Yes, the Islamic Republic had accelerated the activities of its weapons groups so that maybe the time it would take to make a nuclear weapon, or many of them, was reduced from 2 years to 1 year or even several months. But seeing the degree to which Israel had penetrated Iran's nuclear and military programs, it's clear that Jerusalem had a clear line of vision on how far Iran had progressed, and sources had conveyed to the Post not long ago that Tehran was still not close to the point of no return. And so, again, the Jerusalem Post is saying that it wasn't the nuclear issue that led Israel to attack Iran. And just extremely telling and important. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the strikes here. This one I wrote for antiwar.com. It was kind of my breaking news article. I updated it throughout the night on Saturday night. Trump announced a successful attack on Iranian nuclear sites. So President Trump announced on Saturday that the U.S. had completed an attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran. We now know this was dubbed Operation Midnight Hammer. I thought it was kind of funny. I'm sure Pete Hegseth came up with that because most nights at midnight he's already hammered. So this is what President Trump wrote on Truth Social. This is how the American people found out about this attack, by the way, that Trump wrote this on Truth Social. We have completed our very successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordoz, Natanz, and Esfahan. All planes are now outside of Iranian airspace. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site for Fordow. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military force in the world that could have done this. Now is the time for peace. Thank you for your attention to this matter. In an address to the nation, which was very short, only about 3 minutes, Trump was clearly reading a script. He said Iran's 3 main nuclear enrichment sites had been completely obliterated, and Trump added that if peace does not come quickly, the U.S. would conduct larger attacks soon. So Iranian state media downplayed the success of the strike, saying the personnel and nuclear material were removed from these facilities before the attack. And then Friday night, we have Fox News reporter Jennifer Griffin. So again, this is a pro-government source here. She is not trying to embarrass or humiliate the Trump administration. Said she spoke with a well-placed source who did not believe the Esfahan facility was destroyed, saying there's no way they got in the tunnel. It's deeper than Fordow and harder rock. So Axios reporter Brock Ravid, you know what, just another note here, because we have had some more reporting around how successful the attacks were. Most of the analysis seems to be around the Fordow facility, where I guess the U.S. dropped 6 of the 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs on that facility, maybe more. My understanding it was 6. They used 7 B-2 bombers, and each B-2 bomber is capable of carrying 2 of the 30,000-pound bombs. And so it seemed to me that must have meant that 6 hit the Fordow while 8 hit Natanz, although it's not exactly clear which number that is. If you look at images of, and again, most of the satellite imagery has been of Fordow, it's not exactly clear to me one way or the other if it was destroyed or not. According to the IAEA, there's not any radiation leaking. So certainly if they did attack it and it was a successful attack, Iran had already removed all the nuclear material from the site. And, you know, I'm not sure exactly if they did or didn't have success. I'm guessing that will be known in the coming days. I imagine that Trump's statement that it's completely obliterated is untrue. I believe Pete Hegseth was asked about this, and he wouldn't give a firm date, saying that, oh, we had set Iran's nuclear program back years, which I would imagine means that that site is not destroyed. And I saw Israel carried out some airstrikes on apparent Iranian attempts to return to the site, right? So the Iranians said the site was evacuated before it was hit. There's satellite imagery of trucks and other things at the site ahead of time. And so Iran evacuated personnel and troops from the site, and then they tried to return, and Israel bombed them, which again would suggest to me that there's at least a good amount of concern that that site was not completely or in any significant way destroyed. If they're just going to a crater in the ground, then why bomb them? Versus if you know that strike wasn't destroyed and they're going to start maybe making an operation again or salvaging a bunch of equipment or something like that, that's when you would carry out bombing. Now, as far as Esfahan, this is a facility that was apparently only targeted with 30 cruise missiles. And this is what Jennifer Griffin is saying here, that given the geology around the rods and the location of the Esfahan facility, the fact that that wasn't hit with those 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs would suggest that that facility was not completely destroyed either. So, Axios reporter Brock Ravid said Israeli officials confirmed that Tel Aviv was informed of the strike before the operation. He added that Trump had called him personally, Brock Ravid, following the attack with the message, "We had a great success tonight. Your Israel is much safer now." Ravid is an Israeli who served in an Israeli army intelligence unit. So Trump also called Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu after the strike. Netanyahu posted a video on social media Saturday night praising Trump's decision to bomb Iran, saying, "Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the U.S. will change history." In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things, but tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. It has done what no other country on earth could do. And this is just, pumping up Donald Trump and making him feel like, oh, he's the biggest, toughest guy on the block, because I think the Israelis have gotten very good at manipulating Trump. So Reuters reports, speaking with officials who confirmed that B-2 bombers were involved in the attack. There was a report earlier in the day on Saturday that 6 B-52s had been sent to Guam, and this was apparently a deception. I'm not sure why they did this still. I thought as soon as I heard they were going to Guam and flying over the Pacific, it really didn't make sense to me, because I was fairly certain that if the U.S. was going to bomb Iran with B-52s, they would launch and then they would travel east and fly over Europe. Of course, if they are in Guam, they would have to fly the long way around India, over the Indian Ocean, to then get, around Pakistan as well, to then get to Iran, where if they're flying the other way, there's a lot of allied airspace that they could fly over, Turkey, Iraq, any of the European countries, although I think they flew over the Mediterranean Sea according to the flight plans. So just very interesting. Following the attack, the Pentagon began warning U.S. troops in the region that strikes likely put them in danger of an Iranian retaliatory attack. And we will get into the potential retaliation after we got, I think, one or two more stories here first. This next one, I wrote for the Libertarian Institute on June 22nd. Report: Netanyahu convinced Trump to expand Iran attack before bombing beyond Fordow. So days before the U.S. attack on Iran, President Donald Trump informed Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of his decision to strike the Islamic Republic's Fordow nuclear site, according to the Jerusalem Post. In the following days, Tel Aviv convinced the White House to expand the operation to other nuclear facilities, that would be Natanz and Esfahan. So the Post wrote, 4 days ago, there was a phone call between Netanyahu and the U.S. president, during which Trump said, "I've decided to launch a strike," an Israeli official told the Post on Sunday. While Trump initially only planned to bomb Fordow, Israeli officials pressed him to go further. Another source told the outlet Netanyahu and Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer managed to convince Trump to also target the Isfahan facility and the enrichment site at Natanz, both of which Israel had already attacked in the past week, in order to what they called finish the job. Since Trump's return to the White House, Tel Aviv has increased its influence in Washington. In the lead up to the American strike on Iran, President Trump appeared to believe in Israeli intelligence assessment about Iran's nuclear program over the conclusions of his own intelligence chief, Tulsi Gabbard. Israeli officials additionally told the Post that Saturday's night attack was carried out in full coordination with Tel Aviv, and that U.S. strikes relied on Israeli intelligence. And I did a whole show of the Kyle Anzalone show. Check it out. Subscribe to the channel. First link in the show notes page on Sunday night, basically breaking down how Trump is captured by Netanyahu. He's allowing, right? He is the king of the world empire, right, at this point. So he doesn't have to go along with Netanyahu's demands and things like that. But he is, and, we essentially have President Bibi right now in the United States. I also added at the end of my article, this I found interesting. The Israeli military chief warned his country on Friday there could be a protracted conflict in the Middle East. I also see Netanyahu downplaying the chances of a war of attrition, but it is notable to me that Israel is, at least in some respects, warning its citizens that this war could go on for some time. Now, J.D. Vance, our vice president, one of the people in the administration who is supposed to be a skeptic. And look, there's been a lot of attention to a couple of things that I don't have stories on over the past couple of days that were supposed to be downplaying the chances of a U.S. attack on Israel. The Trump 2 weeks before he makes a decision, and J.D. Vance saying that he didn't want the U.S. to get dragged into another Middle Eastern war. I wonder if these were similar to the message that Trump put out before the initial Israeli attack, efforts to get Iran to let its guard down. My guess is it didn't work a second time, but this is just a level of propaganda and the lies that our government is willing to tell our people for the benefits of Israel. So this is J.D. Vance's statement after why the American people shouldn't be worried about Iran because President Trump isn't dumb. So Vice President J.D. Vance said on Sunday that Americans who are opposed to another war in the Middle East shouldn't worry because President Trump isn't dumb. The vice president made the comments in an interview with NBC News where he justified and defended President Trump's bombing of Iranian nuclear facilities, which was carried out without congressional approval, making it illegal under the Constitution. So Vance said, I certainly empathize with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is back then we had dumb presidents, and now we have a president who actually knows how to accomplish America's national security objectives. This is just silly. Vance is saying it's not going to be drawn out in a long thing. And of course, neither was Iraq supposed to be, but that's what it turned into. All right, next up here. Pretty quickly after J.D. Vance made that statement, President Trump made him look pretty dumb. Trump suggests he wants regime change in Iran. So Vance is saying, don't worry, we're not getting into another stupid regime change war. This isn't going to be a protracted statement. And then Trump goes on Truth Social and says, it's not politically correct to use the term regime change, but the current Iranian regime is unable to make Iran great again. Why wouldn't there be a regime change? MIGA, M-I-G-A, make Iran great again. This is just absolutely stupid and is probably going to help the Iranian government, with the rally around the flag effect. So next up here, looking at the potential fallout, of course it is possible for Iran to start attacking U.S. military bases in the region, maybe working with Hezbollah, the Shia militias of Iraq and Syria, the Houthis in Yemen, to also carry out attacks on U.S. bases. I'm a little bit skeptical that Iran immediately goes that option without another attack from the United States. I think Iran is in a tough position here because it's now involved in something of a fist fight with the Israelis. However, Israel has a gun in its back pocket known as a nuclear weapon. And so if you start kicking Israel's ass too bad in this fight, Israel is just going to roll out the nukes and also has the U.S. to step in and basically dominate the Iranians. And so if Iran starts swinging at the Iranians, then it's going to be a massive 2-on-1 fight. It already pretty much is, but obviously the U.S. could deliver a lot more firepower than even Iran could, or Israel could, to Iran. And so I think Tehran probably has a pretty strong motivation not to immediately start attacking and killing a bunch of American soldiers, but rather to try to keep the war to the extent possible between Tehran and Tel Aviv. That being said, there are other actions that Iran could take that would hurt the U.S. and its allies without directly going to war with the U.S., and that includes closing the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian parliament approved that on Sunday. I'm not sure if the Ayatollah is going to go along with it. We will see. Now, last up here, I have this article that I wrote for JudgeNap.com on Sunday. Representative Thomas Massie slams Trump for launching unconstitutional war on Iran. So Congressman Thomas Massie blasted President Trump in a series of posts on X. Trump responded on Truth Social saying the Republican representative was lazy. So immediately following the U.S. strikes on Iran Saturday night, Massie posted on X, "This is not constitutional." House Speaker Mike Johnson then endorsed Trump's strides, claiming they did not violate Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution that grants war-making powers to Congress. Massey fired back, "Why didn't you call us back from vacation to vote on military action if there was a serious threat to our country? I introduced a war powers resolution on Tuesday while Congress was on vacation. We have plenty of time to debate on this." And, you know, we live in a post-constitutional America now, unfortunately. There's no war powers in the Congress anymore. They all reside in the executive, and Congress isn't interested in voting on it. The president's not interested in consulting Congress on it, and so the president could just go to war whenever the hell he wants. Massey then appeared on Meet the Press Sunday morning saying, "My question is, does 3 bombings and were done with Iran's nuclear ambitions, the 2 weeks to slow the spread of 2025, which I think is a brilliant way to describe this, particularly to Republicans, to understand how easy it's going to be for mission creep and for us to get drawn into this very long and complex conflict." The congressman also called out the influence of AIPAC over his colleagues on Capitol Hill. The criticism of Trump's attack on Iran from a principled conservative standpoint irked the president, and he went on a long rant on Truth Social saying that Massey always votes no. He doesn't respect Thomas Massey. Massey's lazy. Massey's ineffective, just like Rand Paul. It goes on and on. It's just this long rambling post that's more representative of somebody who's in the early stages of dementia, like, you know, the old man who just loses it at every little kid who throws a baseball in his yard and goes on these massive long rants. And so, when you see posts like this, you do wonder about the mental health of our commander-in-chief as he's taking us into a war with a major Asian power. So, of course, Massey is correct about the constitutionality of this and that Trump should have gone to Congress and that he should now, in my view, be impeached for this. Andrew Napolitano, the judge, had a great column that we ran at antiwar.com and, of course, appears on Judging Freedom last week, and he explained that under the Constitution, only Congress can declare war on a nation or group. The last time it did so was to initiate American involvement in World War II, but Congress has given away limited authority to presidents and permit them to fight undeclared wars, such as the War Powers Resolution in 1973 and President George W. Bush's invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. Congress has not only declared war on Russia or Gaza or Iran, it has not authorized the use of American military forces in those countries, yet it has given the president a blank check and has authorized him to spend it on military equipment for Ukraine and Israel however he sees fit. President Donald Trump came into office promising to end America's forever wars. Instead, the United States continues to fund his predecessors entered into Ukraine, the goal of which was to eliminate Russian troops from Ukraine and Crimea and drive Russian President Vladimir Putin from office. None of these objectives is realistically attainable. In Gaza, the Israeli goal has been to remove by death or force all Palestinians from their ancestral land. That goal, which is morally reprehensible and military unfeasible, has produced more than 55,000 civilian casualties. None of this is to the benefit of the United States. In Iran, the president lured the Iranians into believing the U.S. was seriously negotiating with them, while the U.S. intelligence assets planned and helped to execute the Israeli attacks on Tehran last week, some of which murdered negotiators. Does Iran, which the U.S. and Israeli intelligence have concluded has no nuclear weapons, as Israel does, propose the slightest threat to U.S. national security? It does not, and I think his talk on that is fairly conclusive. Just one last article here I wrote for JudgeNap.com. As you guys can see, I was very busy this past weekend. Iran, Israel's war, and U.S. strikes killed nuclear talks. And so this is the Iranian foreign minister, and he posted on X, last week, we were in negotiations with the U.S. when Israel decided to blow up that diplomacy. This week, we held talks with the E3, which is the UK, France, and Germany, and the European Union when the U.S. decided to blow up that diplomacy, what conclusion would you draw? To Britain and the EU High Rep, is it Iran which must return to the table, or is it the U.S. that's blowing up the talks? And so I think he's right on that analysis that, of course, Iran is interested in making a nuclear deal with the U.S. It's Israel that is uninterested in that nuclear deal from happening, and now President Donald Trump. All right. That's where I'm going to wrap up that show. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. I will be back later today with the all-new episode of the Kyle and Anzalone Show. Be sure to subscribe. We are over 1,000 subscribers now on YouTube, so making a lot of progress on that channel. I'm also over 9,000 followers now on X, so thank all of you so much for your support for this show, all my writing that I do with antiwar.com, the Libertarian Institute, judgenap.com, and specifically the Kyle Anzalone Show, which I'm very proud of the product that we are putting out there. And, with your continued support, sharing, involvement with that show, I think it has massive potential to grow. So help us out with that. Subscribe, watch live, share it out, and we will be back with more episodes of both shows later this week.